All right. Next up, an interesting story about a Dodger who had an injury revealed after the fact. The story here is that David Peralta had surgery to repair a torn flexor tendon in his left elbow, which, if you watch David Peralta play baseball over the last couple of months, would not surprise you that he had an injury. What maybe is most surprising is that he apparently had sustained this injury, Matt, during or before the All-Star break and continued to play on beyond that. If you go and looked from mid-July on, this is a guy who had a 58 weighted runs created plus and a 236 batting average. The Dodgers kept trotting him out there, Matt. And by the way, it's worth pointing out, he went on to achieve some performance incentives based on games played that added, I believe, an extra $1.5 million to his paycheck as well. What do you make of this story, Matt, and the news that this surgery happened and this injury was 3 months old?
Yeah, so my initial reaction, like you said, was, "Oh, okay, that makes sense," because we saw Peralta's production tailing off, really in the I mean, yes, in the second half, but really like the last month of the season, maybe 6 weeks. Uh, then my question was like, okay, like if that is the look, credit to David Peralta for pushing through it. Like even yes, fine, like there were incentives for him to reach. Okay, maybe that was a mutually beneficial thing for him
Yeah,
and the Dodgers if he kept playing. But once you got into the playoffs, like
yeah,
before the NLDS started, I argued that I felt, and I based it on my good old trusted eye test that Chris Taylor should be in the lineup instead of David Peralta, regardless of whether a righty or lefty pitcher is on the mound. Scott then was able to back it up with his nerd stats, so it was a foolproof plan that Chris Taylor needed to be in the Dodgers
yeah.
lineup. And Dave Roberts said before the NLDS started, no, like we're going to stick to basically what we've been doing. So I thought, okay, fine. It's worth noting Peralta did have a double in the disastrous game one, I guess. And so maybe that kept him in the lineup for game two. But I think once it got to game three and Dave Roberts was open to making changes, and they did end up making those with Kike Hernandez and Will Smith dropping in the batting order. At that point, considering what is known about David Peralta, and there's no way that this injury was a surprise to the team. I'm like, they knew what was going on. Like, why was Chris Taylor then not starting game three of the NLDS at that point is my question.
Well, and Matt just answered, Blake, the question I was going to ask to you. Is there any chance that the Dodgers didn't understand the severity of David Peralta's injury and maybe thought like they would have gone and made sure he had the scans necessary to identify this, right?
Yeah, you'd think so, but how the Dodgers have handled some injuries this year, we've kind of talked about it all year where they just haven't managed anything well there. And then goes back to the point Andrew Friedman made again. It was an organizational failure of a year, and that's what this was showing. Like, there's just no reason David Peralta should have been playing injured. If he felt some pain, he should have reported it to the team. They should have got him checked out. And then you find out there's injury there, and you say, okay, you're going on the IL. Let's bring up Michael Busch, who deserves a chance to play, and we'll give him some run and see what he can do. Or you could keep him on the bench, and you could go with Chris Taylor in left field and starting him and giving him a run. Or they could have kept David Peralta off the postseason roster, kept Ahmed Rosario on because they did end up needing a pinch hitter against the lefty, and it ended up being Austin Barnes instead of the guy they went out and traded for. So just an organizational failure, top to down, with front office management, just everyone involved with it. And we knew it was before the trade deadline also, so they could have went and added maybe Tommy Pham, who's been lighting up the postseason and has been reportedly wanting to play for the Dodgers. So there's just so much they could have done to kind of fix this. And when they knew he was injured and they still kept playing him in the postseason, that's just a failure all around.
Matt, you mentioned it. I mean, we know like Tony Gonsolin was injured. They knew he was injured. They were desperate for pitching for as long as they could get it. They knew Clayton Kershaw was injured. They kept playing him because A, he was performing, and B, they were desperate for starting pitching. Are we? You hinted. You said it. Are we positive the Dodgers knew about David Peralta's injury? Are we positive that he knew that he didn't know where his incentives were at, and didn't want to jeopardize this, down the stretch, and wanted to keep playing?
Yeah, I mean, I can't definitively sit here and say the Dodgers absolutely knew. I would be hard pressed to believe that they didn't. They weren't aware of it at some point. And I think it's also worth noting because when Peralta first posted a picture of himself in the brace after having surgery. My first thought was, did it happen when he was hit by the pitch during the National Series on the inside of his left elbow? So they definitely took x-rays at that point. Now, would x-rays have shown the tendon tear? Maybe not. Maybe they're, more focused on a broken bone at that point. But I don't know. I don't necessarily believe that. I think David Peralta might have reported it and just said, and like, it would have been one of those things like, okay, like, can you keep playing through it? Are you okay? And he says, yes, for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And so fine. Like, I'm okay. Like, I don't even care about the regular season. Like, fine, let him keep playing through it during the regular season. Let him reach his contract incentives. Totally fine with that. Even though like his production would tail off, I'm okay with that. My issue is when it came to the playoffs, like, what are we doing here? Especially like, if you want to start him in game 1, fine. And I get, like I said, maybe the double earned him another start in game 2. But then once you get into game 3, like, it was win or you're getting swept.
Yeah.
And I don't want to rehash a bunch of stuff. Like, I know Dave Roberts said a lot about urgency, but again, I feel like this is sort of another instance of where he propped up this idea of, we're going to have different urgency this time around, better focus, yada, yada. And then his actions kind of said otherwise in some regard.
Yeah. And I mean, the final word on this, like, Blake, I just want to believe that if the Dodgers knew the severity of this injury combined with how awful he had been for the final 2.5 months, like, I just want to believe that they would not have kept running him out there in meaningful games, especially in the postseason. I mean, look, again, to Matt's point, however they wanted to handle the end of the regular season didn't really matter. I still think if you're not going to play him in the postseason, then getting Chris Taylor more regular bats would have made some sense. We talked on our show about how, I think it was in the month of September, he was like the second or third best hitter on the team. Maybe it was August. I just, like, you referenced organizational failure, which I think is the ultimate point here. Like, this is probably the best example of organizational failure, when clearly certain people and departments weren't talking to each other clearly, or else the Dodgers just made one of the most awful, indefensible decisions possible by continuing to run this guy out there.
Yeah, I definitely agree with all that you said there. I guess the hope that the Dodgers didn't actually know about it would be, Andrew Friedman said during his press conference they didn't know of any surgeries that were scheduled for their players. So
There you go.
like, if David Peralta just didn't tell them, then I guess that's just fully on him. But I mean, I don't see that being a scenario where a guy's playing through a torn tendon in his arm and just doesn't say anything about it. It just seems very far-fetched to me. I also feel like the Dodgers could have just like paid him the money for the incentives he needed rather than having him play through the injury. Like, at the end of the day, for them, that's not much money. It's $1 million on his contract. So it's such a weird situation. Like, if Peralta didn't report it to them, that seems very weird to me. If the Dodgers just ignored it, that seems weird to me. Like, nothing about it makes sense. But like, looking in hindsight, it's like clear he was playing injured, I guess, now that we know about it. So it's just a very weird situation all around, and that's like the best way I can describe it.
We need the Fabian Ardaya insider piece where Dodgers officials were surprised to hear the extent of David Peralta's injury. Like, I just need that in my life, because to your point, I mean, Andrew Friedman made the comment they weren't expecting any surgeries. And yet David Peralta, again, played the second half with a torn flexor tendon in his left elbow and has had surgery. He is now, of course, a free agent. Let's